Hey guys, I want to tell you a story about a client named Robert. Robert came to me while he was in the middle of a lawsuit on one of his rental properties, and he asked me, "Hey Carla, should I transfer that property to my LLC?" Well, I am not an attorney and I certainly advise him to seek legal advice, but I wouldn't think in the middle of a lawsuit that you would want to transfer your property into an LLC at that time. Unfortunately, Robert ended up having to sell that property because he didn't have the proper tax structuring and he didn't have the proper asset protection while he was in the middle of that lawsuit. I am Carla Dennis, a tax professional, and I want to tell you exactly what you need to do so that you don't end up like Robert. I get these questions all the time. Carla, should I put my property in an LLC? When should I transfer my property to LLC? Carla, how many LLCs should I have? Why should I have an LLC? Is an umbrella policy good enough for me? Well, I am going to give you 5 considerations on some things that you need to consider when thinking about an LLC. The very first thing that I want you to consider is, what is an LLC? I think it's so important just to educate you. An LLC is a limited liability company. It is truly a company, and you have to form it with the Secretary of State. An LLC can be a single member LLC, just you and yourself, or it can be a multi-member LLC, meaning there's multiple members, partners inside of the LLC. When you have a single member LLC, it's disregarded for tax purposes and it's going to be filed in with your individual tax return. A multi-member LLC is going to require a separate filing. You're going to have to file a Form 1065. So when thinking about whether you should have an LLC, you have to think about the tax filing that goes along with it. Consideration number 2, decide if you want to be a property owner or if you want to be a real estate investor and put a business around your LLC. When you are a real estate investor and you have a business, IRS looks at your business more favorably. You're able to take more write-offs because now you have another bucket to put the write-offs in. You want to make sure that when you're doing this as a business owner that you're really serious, because most of my investors are really trying to run a tight ship. They really want to squeeze as much profit out of that investment as they possibly can. Therefore, they're going to have a lot more write-offs and may even take a loss. By doing so and having a business, IRS is going to look at you more favorably because you're moving away from just being a property owner and you're moving towards being a real estate investor. That is going to bring me to my very next consideration. Consideration number 3 is you need to consider asset protection. Having asset protection will give you exactly what you want, some protection over your assets. But here's some things that you have to consider. You want to make sure that you are separating yourself from the business, because an entity such as an LLC really is a separate business. You want to maintain a separate bank account, and I really do mean a separate bank account. You want to go to the bank and set up a bank account under your LLC. You want to make sure that you're writing your expenses for your business through your business account and not commingling funds. Making sure you do not pierce that LLC veil. That's going to be very important for asset protection and making sure that in the unfortunate event that you get yourself in a lawsuit, that your entity is there to protect you. You will also want to make sure that you title the property in the name of the LLC and just not use the LLC sort of as a holding bucket. You want to make sure that you get an attorney or an escrow officer to change that title for you. The 4th consideration is whether or not I should have an umbrella policy or whether or not an LLC is enough. This is really an excellent question. First of all, let's define an umbrella policy. An umbrella policy is exactly that. It's sort of like an umbrella that blankets you over everything in the event that something happens. But you want to make sure that you have the proper insurance in place first. Whether it's landlord's insurance, you got to make sure that you do that. And your umbrella policy kicks in in the event that there's a lawsuit and in the event that there's a judgment because of that lawsuit. But we want to try to circumvent lawsuits from the very beginning, right? So having an LLC deters an individual from even wanting to sue you. The thing that I always kind of think about is when I'm thinking about whether I should just have an LLC or get umbrella insurance, it's almost like getting into a fight. I want to learn how to kickbox first before I get into the fight versus getting into the fight, stopping and going to get the kickboxing lessons. So you want to make sure you have everything in order first. Think about the LLC, and the umbrella insurance may still be a good idea. The fifth consideration is how many LLCs do you need? Well, this really depends. I get this question often. The thing that I am going to say to you, again, decide. Do you want to be a property owner or do you want to be an investor? My recommendation is always, if you're going to invest in property, try to get asset protection, at least get one LLC. If you're going to get multiple properties and you have equity in those properties, remember, if you're putting them all in one bucket, all that equity is going to be exposed to a potential lawsuit. So you have to decide about switching around LLCs and moving properties to different LLCs based on the amount of equity that you have in your properties. Another consideration too, when you're thinking about multiple LLCs, is whether or not your properties are all in the same state. If you have properties in Nevada, properties in California, properties in Kansas, you may want to make sure you have an LLC in each state because each state has different laws. So for example, let's say you have 5 properties, and let's say property number 1 has $25,000 worth of equity, and each property has equity in it, and you have a total of $500,000 worth of equity. If you get into a lawsuit and all of your properties are sitting inside one LLC, all of that equity is going to be exposed. But when you have multiple LLCs, you can divide up your equity and kind of capsulize the exposure and limit your exposure. That's one of the benefits of having multiple LLCs. I sort of like to look at it like insurance, right? It's like I want to limit what I am going to allow those predators to get to. When you have multiple LLCs, yes, it is going to cost you more in tax filings, but you have to ask yourself, do you want to pay a little bit for tax filings or a lot more in lawsuits? LLCs do not prevent people from suing you, but what they are a deterrent to make people think twice, because typically people that have LLCs are a lot more sophisticated and savvier investors. You do not want to be like Robert and think about putting your property in an LLC in the middle of a lawsuit. You actually want to take the time to stop and plan and get the right asset protection and tax structure in place before you get yourself in a situation. And the best time to do it is in the very beginning when you're contemplating purchasing property. If you would like more information, please subscribe, comment below, or click on the link.